My name is Marcus Chen, and on a Wednesday morning I accidentally discovered my manager's Spotify playlist. The title was Jordan Peterson on Dominance Hierarchies Work Edition. I took a screenshot. By that afternoon, the CEO had seen it. By late afternoon, my manager was in a closed-door meeting that lasted 3 hours. By Friday, she was gone. What I found wasn't just a playlist. It was a manual. A step-by-step guide she'd been using to manipulate our entire department for over a year. I worked at a tech startup in Austin called Momentum Labs. We were about 80 people, mostly engineers and product designers. The company built project management software for remote teams. Nothing glamorous, but it paid well, and the culture was supposed to be collaborative. Open floor plan, free snacks, weekly all-hands meetings where everyone could ask questions. It looked good on paper, but under the surface, something was very wrong. My manager's name was Rachel Voss. She was 34, sharp, always dressed like she was about to give a TED Talk. Black blazer, minimalist jewelry, the kind of confidence that made you second-guess yourself before you even spoke. She had this way of looking at you when you talked, like she was analyzing every word, every pause, every micro-expression. It was unsettling, but I told myself it meant she was engaged, that she cared. Rachel had joined the company 8 months before me. She came from a bigger firm in San Francisco, brought a lot of buzzwords with her: psychological safety, radical candor, growth mindset. In meetings, she quoted books constantly. As Brené Brown says, Simon Sinek talks about this. Jordan Peterson explains it perfectly. At first, I thought she was just well-read. I thought she was one of those managers who actually studied leadership, who wanted to do it right. Then I started noticing patterns. Pattern 1, she'd ask you a question in a one-on-one, something personal. What's your biggest fear at work? What makes you feel insecure? You'd answer because it felt like trust building. It felt like she was creating that psychological safety she talked about so much. 2 weeks later, she'd use that exact fear against you in front of the team. Marcus struggles with public speaking, so maybe someone else should present this. I never said I struggled. I said I got nervous sometimes. She turned nervousness into incompetence. I remember the first time it happened to me. We were in a team meeting discussing who would present our quarterly results to the executive team. I had been working on the project for 3 months. I knew every detail, every metric, every decision point. But Rachel said, Marcus mentioned he gets anxious with public speaking, so I think it's better if Sarah presents. We want to put our best foot forward. Sarah looked uncomfortable. I felt humiliated. And the worst part was I couldn't argue without proving her point. Pattern 2. She created competition where there didn't need to be any. We only have budget for 1 senior promotion this quarter. The client can only work with 1-point person. I can only mentor 1 person right now. It made us desperate, made us work weekends, made us turn on each other. I watched my coworkers, people I'd had lunch with, people I'd collaborated with start hoarding information, undermining each other's work, competing for Rachel's approval like it was oxygen. There was this guy, David, who had been my friend since I started. We'd grab coffee, talk about projects, help each other debug code. After Rachel announced there was only 1 promotion available, David stopped talking to me. He started staying late, sending emails at midnight to prove he was working harder. He started pointing out my mistakes in meetings. When I asked him what was going on, he said, "Nothing personal, man. I just really need this promotion." Later, I found out there was no budget limit, no client restriction. Rachel was lying. She was manufacturing scarcity to control us. Pattern 3. She'd compliment you privately, then tear you down publicly. "Marcus, this design work is brilliant," she'd say in Slack. Then in the team meeting, "I'm concerned Marcus isn't thinking strategically enough." It kept you off balance. You'd work twice as hard just to prove the private version of you was the real one. You'd start questioning your own perception of reality. Was the work good or wasn't it? Was she being honest in private or in public? You never knew where you stood. I started documenting these patterns about 4 months into working under Rachel. Nothing formal, just notes on my phone. March 12th. Rachel praised my wireframes in DM, then criticized my strategic thinking in team meeting. March 19th. Rachel said only one person could lead the client project, made me and Sarah compete for it. I didn't know what I was going to do with these notes. I just knew something felt wrong, and I wanted to remember the details. The day I found the playlist, I wasn't snooping. Rachel had called me into her office to review a project brief. Her office was small, glass-walled, with a standing desk and a bookshelf full of leadership books. Atomic Habits, Dare to Lead, 12 Rules for Life. The spines were pristine, like they'd never been opened. Her laptop was open on the desk, screen facing me. She stepped out to grab coffee. I sat there waiting. That's when I saw it. Spotify was open in the corner of her screen. A playlist titled Jordan Peterson on Dominance Hierarchies Work Edition. Under it, there were 47 tracks. Podcast clips, audiobook excerpts, lecture recordings. I stared at it for a moment, confused. Then something clicked. All those quotes, all those tactics, they weren't coming from a place of genuine learning. They were coming from a manual. I didn't think. I just pulled out my phone and took a screenshot. The angle was clear. You could see the playlist name, the track count, the timestamp. When Rachel came back, I acted normal. We reviewed the brief. I nodded in the right places. But my heart was pounding. I felt like I'd just uncovered something I wasn't supposed to see. That night, I went home and looked up every single track on that playlist. I found most of them on YouTube, on podcast platforms, in audiobook samples. It wasn't random. It was a curriculum. A deliberate, structured course in psychological manipulation disguised as leadership development. Clip 1. Establishing Dominance Without Aggression. It was a lecture about how to assert authority through subtle cues, body language, tone, strategic silence. Clip 2. How to Identify Weak Personality Types. A discussion about spotting people who are conflict-averse, approval-seeking, insecure. Clip 3. Using Reciprocity to Create Obligation. A breakdown of how small favors can be leveraged to control behavior. Clip 4. The Power of Manufactured Scarcity. An explanation of how limiting resources, real or perceived, increases their value and makes people compete. Clip 5. Maintaining Control Through Strategic Vulnerability. This one made my stomach turn. It was about how leaders can share small, calculated vulnerabilities to create a false sense of intimacy, making employees feel trusted and therefore more willing to share their own weaknesses, which can then be exploited. She wasn't learning, she was training, and we were her practice subjects. I sat in my apartment that night staring at my laptop screen, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Every tactic she'd used on me, on David, on Sarah, on everyone in our department, it was all there. Documented, taught, packaged as leadership development. I thought about all the times I'd blamed myself for feeling manipulated, for feeling like I was going crazy. I wasn't crazy. I was being systematically controlled. I didn't know what to do with the screenshot. I sat on it for 2 days. I thought about confronting Rachel directly, but I knew that would go nowhere. She'd deny it, twist it, make me look paranoid. I thought about telling my coworkers, but I didn't have proof beyond the screenshot, and I wasn't sure they'd believe me. Some of them were still competing for her approval, still convinced she was a great leader. Then, on Friday afternoon, the CEO sent out a company-wide email. His name was Tom Reeves, mid-40s, former engineer who'd built the company from the ground up. The email said, "We're doing a culture audit. If you have concerns about leadership or team dynamics, please reach out directly. All reports will be handled confidentially." I stared at that email for 20 minutes. My cursor hovered over the reply button. Then I forwarded the screenshot with one line. "I think you should see this." I hit send before I could change my mind. Then I closed my laptop and tried not to think about what I'd just done. Monday morning, I got a calendar invite. Meeting with CEO. My stomach dropped. I thought I'd made a mistake. I thought I was about to get fired for invading privacy, for taking a screenshot of someone's personal Spotify account. When I walked into the CEO's office, he was sitting with the head of HR, a woman named Linda, and the general counsel, a man named Peter. The screenshot was printed out on the table. "Tell me how you found this," Tom said. His voice wasn't angry. It was careful, measured. I told him everything: the open laptop, the playlist, the patterns I'd noticed over the past 4 months, the manufactured competition, the public humiliation, the private praise followed by public criticism. I pulled out my phone and showed him my notes. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he exchanged a glance with Linda and Peter. Then he slid a piece of paper across the desk. "We pulled her company laptop logs," he said. "She's been taking notes. Detailed notes on every employee in her department." The paper was a printed document, a Word file titled Behavioral Profiles Q3. My name was on it. Next to my name, conflict averse, seeks approval, responds to public praise, private criticism, push harder on insecurity around leadership presence. I felt sick. There were 8 other names: David, Sarah, Jennifer, Carlos. Each one had a profile. Each one had tactics listed underneath. Use scarcity. Leverage fear of failure. Create dependency. Exploit need for validation. It was clinical, cold, like we were lab rats in an experiment. Tom looked at me. "This isn't management," he said. "This is manipulation." Linda leaned forward. "How long has this been going on?" I said, "At least 4 months that I've noticed. But she's been here for over a year. It could be longer." Peter, the lawyer, was taking notes. He said, "This could be grounds for a hostile work environment claim. We need to act quickly." By late afternoon, Rachel was in Tom's office. I don't know what was said, but I saw her face when she came out. White, shaking. She didn't look at anyone. She went straight to her desk, grabbed her bag, and left. She didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. By Friday, HR sent an email. "Rachel Voss is no longer with the company. We take workplace culture seriously and are committed to ensuring all employees feel respected and supported." No details. No drama. Just gone. The playlist, the profiles, the patterns, all of it disappeared with her. Except it didn't, because I still had the screenshot, and I still remembered every single tactic she'd used. The days after Rachel left were strange. The office felt lighter, but also uncertain. People didn't know what had happened. Rumors spread. Some people thought she'd been poached by another company. Others thought she'd quit. A few people suspected something had gone wrong, but nobody knew the details. Tom called a team meeting 3 days after Rachel left. He stood in front of our department and said, "I know there's been a lot of uncertainty. Rachel is no longer with the company. We're conducting a review of management practices, and we're committed to creating a healthier work environment. If anyone has concerns or experiences they want to share, please reach out to HR. Everything will be handled confidentially." After the meeting, David came up to me. He looked exhausted. He said, "Do you know what happened?" I said, "Not officially, but I think it was the right decision." He nodded slowly. Then he said, "I'm sorry, man, for how I acted. I don't know what I was thinking." I said, "You were being manipulated. We all were." Over the next few weeks, people started opening up. Sarah told me about a one-on-one where Rachel had asked about her relationship with her mother, then later used that information to undermine her confidence. Jennifer talked about how Rachel had convinced her she wasn't ready for a promotion, even though her performance reviews were excellent. Carlos described how Rachel had pitted him against another developer, making them both believe only one could succeed. The more we talked, the more we realized how systematic it had been. Rachel hadn't just been a bad manager. She'd been running a psychological operation, using research-backed manipulation tactics to control an entire team. 3 weeks later, Tom called me into his office again. This time it was just the 2 of us, he said. "I want to offer you Rachel's position. Lead the team she used to manage." I was stunned. I said, "I'm not sure I'm qualified." He said, "You saw what was happening and you didn't stay quiet. That's the kind of leadership we need." Not someone who's read every book on management, but someone who actually cares about people. I accepted. Not because I wanted power, but because I wanted to prove that leadership didn't have to look like what Rachel had done. I rebuilt the team. No competitions, no manufactured scarcity, no psychological games. Just clear expectations, honest feedback, and respect. I held one-on-ones where I asked people about their goals, their challenges, their ideas, and I never used that information against them. I gave credit publicly and offered criticism privately, constructively. Turns out people work better when they're not constantly afraid. Our productivity went up. Our retention improved. People started collaborating again instead of competing. David and I became friends again. Sarah got the promotion she deserved. The team started to heal. But I couldn't stop thinking about the playlist, about how easy it had been for Rachel to find that content, to learn those tactics, to apply them. I started researching. I found entire communities online dedicated to dark psychology, manipulation tactics, dominance strategies, forums where people shared techniques for controlling others, for exploiting weaknesses, for winning at any cost. Some of it was framed as self-defense. Learn these tactics so you can recognize when they're being used on you. But most of it was just predatory. People teaching other people how to hurt, how to control, how to dominate. And they were using the language of self-improvement, of leadership development, of personal growth. I thought about writing an article, exposing what I'd found. But I didn't want to give Rachel any more attention. I didn't want to turn her into some kind of cautionary tale that people would study and maybe even admire. So I kept it quiet. I kept the screenshot. I kept the document with my name on it. Not because I'm angry, because I never want to forget what it feels like to be someone's experiment. 6 months after Rachel left, I got a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. Her name was Emily. She said she worked at a startup in Denver, and she'd heard through mutual connections about what had happened at Momentum Labs. She said, "I think my manager is doing the same thing. Can we talk?" We got on a call. Emily described the same patterns, the personal questions that got weaponized, the manufactured competition, the public criticism, private praise. She said, "I found a playlist on her laptop. It's called Influence and Persuasion, Leadership Edition. I took a screenshot, but I don't know what to do with it." I told her everything. How I'd documented the patterns, how I'd reported it to the CEO, how the company had acted quickly once they saw the evidence. I said, "You're not crazy. You're being manipulated, and you have the power to stop it." Emily reported her manager. 2 weeks later, the manager was gone. Emily sent me a message. "Thank you. I didn't think anyone would believe me." I said, "I believe you, and you did the right thing." I started hearing from more people. A guy in Seattle, a woman in Boston, a team lead in London. All of them describing the same tactics, the same patterns, the same playlists and documents and psychological games. It was happening everywhere, and most people didn't even realize it was happening to them. I created a document. I called it Recognizing Manipulative Management, a guide for employees. I listed the patterns I'd noticed, the tactics Rachel had used, the warning signs. I shared it anonymously on a few workplace forums. Within a week, it had been downloaded thousands of times. People started sharing their own stories, their own experiences, their own screenshots. I realized this wasn't just about Rachel. It was about a culture that rewards manipulation, that confuses control with leadership, that teaches people to exploit rather than empower. And it was about the fact that all of this information, these tactics, these strategies, these psychological weapons, was freely available, packaged as self-improvement, sold as leadership development. Last I heard, Rachel was working at a startup in Denver, smaller company, same tactics. I didn't warn them, that's not my job. But I did keep the screenshot, and I kept the document with my name on it. And I kept helping people who reached out, who found themselves in the same situation I'd been in. A playlist can't manage people, but it can reveal who someone really is. And sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. I think about that Wednesday morning a lot. about how close I came to saying nothing, to dismissing what I'd seen, to convincing myself I was overreacting, about how one screenshot, one moment of clarity, one decision to speak up, changed the trajectory of an entire team. I think about the people who are still working under managers like Rachel, people who are being profiled, manipulated, controlled, people who think they're the problem, who think they're not good enough, who think they're going crazy. I want them to know, you're not crazy. You're being manipulated, and you have more power than you think. Document the patterns. Take the screenshots, keep the notes. Find the people who have been hurt and ask them to share their stories. Build a case, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. And when the time is right, speak up. Send the email. Make the report. Trust that the truth is stronger than the manipulation. It won't be easy. It will be scary. There will be moments when you want to give up, when you wonder if it's worth it. But it is. Because on the other side of that fear is a workplace where people are treated with dignity, where David doesn't have to compete with his friends, where Sarah gets the recognition she deserves, where you get to go home at the end of the day and feel like you did something that mattered. The screenshot is still on my phone, the playlist title, the track count, the timestamp. I look at it sometimes, not because I'm angry, but because I want to remember. I want to remember that manipulation can be systematic, calculated, taught, but it can also be exposed, stopped, dismantled. Rachel thought she could use Jordan Peterson's ideas about dominance hierarchies to control us. She thought understanding psychology gave her the right to exploit it. But psychology is a tool, and tools can be used to build or to destroy. She chose destruction. I chose exposure. And that made all the difference.